Hope you guys are here to talk about queer stuff in gaming, because, woo! Yay, that's why we're here. So one of the things that, first I guess we'll kind of briefly introduce ourselves. My name's Caitlin Dungan. I am an instructor of rhetoric at George Mason University. I'm also a PhD candidate in queer studies and digital rhetoric. My entire research project is about queer stuff in Mass Effect. This is Rachel. She is my research assistant. And so she's here to talk about all the grunt work that I made her do. This is Megan. She's a software engineer and also helped me kind of go through some of this data. So we are all collectively gamer people who care deeply about increasing representation, positive representation in gaming, as I'm sure you do as well, or you wouldn't be here at 11:30 in the morning. So one of the things that kind of bugs me about about academia and research is that really cool stuff is happening and it's all getting published in the places where normal people who don't read these extremely boring, dense journals don't have access to this. So, sorry? It's so true, right? So it's nobody just picks up research in the and just casually reads this. A lot of this stuff is really interesting and I don't feel like it's getting out, and we're not talking to kind of the right people. And to me, the right people are the people who are actually playing the games and the gaming consumers, and not other researchers who are there's sure a problem, and we're yeah, there is, and we continue to say this. So that's why I like to come and talk at these places, because I feel like we get to, you're my people. We get to talk about this more. As I go to an academic conference and they're yes, these games sure exist. Additionally, can't push the button. Okay, so here's our brief little origin story. I'm gonna tell you a story. How many of you have ever heard of a little game called Fear Effect 2? Yep, about 4 people, which is what I anticipate. Okay, once upon a time, 13-year-old baby Caitlin was playing a game called Fear Effect 2. And this is about the time that I identify as a cisgendered lesbian, so you know, and this is about the time that little baby Caitlin was I really like girls. And pretty much wasn't really sure what to do with this information except for watch a lot of Sailor Moon. And yeah, so playing games was kind of a separate hobby, and it was I really enjoy this, but it had never occurred to me that there might be characters like me until this. However, please take a look at this advertisement for this game. Yeah, so that was an IGN magazine, I think. I remember reading it and I was oh, I have feelings about this picture. Okay, so in one of these scenes, Hannah, who is the one reading Big Guns magazine, they're spies or something. They're trying to get a packet. They're doing spy shit in an elevator, basically. And so they get in the elevator and it's a fancy party in Hong Kong, and they're oh no, there is a security camera. What should we do about it? And Hannah's I know what to do about it, and starts undressing Rain. And I was oh, that, is that what you do when you're a spy? So I'm trying to figure this out. She takes off her dress, and then she turns to the camera and she's boys, this is private, and throws the dress over the camera. Cut to the security people, and they're oh, should we kick him out? And he's no way, man, maybe that dress will fall off. And so I'm just sitting there and I'm trying to figure out is this how I be a lesbian? I'm supposed to A, become a spy, B, go to Hong Kong, 3, strip in an elevator, and I was just sort of baffled, and I was really, I just want to stay at home and read books, but okay. So up until a certain point, that was the only sort of queer female representation that I had in a video game. And I was this is it, I guess. This is what I get. I guess I'll be a big fan. I hated this game. But that was it. That was it for a long time. So I don't want that to happen again to any other little 13-year-old, queer gamers who are looking for themselves and get stuck with that. So that's my mission. That's why I'm doing this kind of thing. So, thank you. Similarly, meanwhile, in New York or Texas, I guess, Megan was going through something similar. So
yeah, I mean, like growing up, I didn't feel like I had any kind of representation of myself in games, and the closest I got was Squall in Final Fantasy VIII. Just someone, obviously male and male presenting, and for me, I'm androgynous and kind of broody, and so that's what he was. And I was like, okay, like this is as good as I'm gonna get for seeing myself in games. So I must like him, because I hadn't quite gotten to the step of like I'm also a lesbian and I like women. But I was like, well, since I want to be this guy so much, like maybe I really like him and I want to be with him, and I'll just tell myself that story forever to please myself and my parents until I'm more comfortable. As I got older and realized that wasn't really realistic, here I am. So similarly to Caitlin, I would have liked having some kind of representation of myself, seeing myself in games and knowing that like I wasn't weird, and like, no, I don't really have to like this man and like feel terrible for the rest of my life. I could actually be happy being myself and being different.
And something like canonical. Someone where it's like, this character is genderqueer, this character is non-binary, like something that is not subtextual would be grand, as well. So, okay, so I'll tell you a little bit about what's going on. I mean, I don't know how many of you casually keep up with research in academia on queer gaming, but it's actually, there's a lot of talk going on right now, which is pretty cool. Adrian Shaw and Bo Ruberg and Edmund Chang are all doing a lot of, there's other people as well, but there's like, it's to the point where there are now like special issues coming out in these journals, and I'm gonna breeze through this part because this is the boring part. But it's good to know that it is gaining traction as a legitimate field of study, not just game studies and not applying the lens of queer theory to games. Queer game studies is actually gaining traction, which is neat. However, a lot of the stuff that's getting published right now is people saying, excuse me, like, okay, there's only so much content we have. We're sick to death of analyzing it. We've done the same characters over and over and over. I don't want to talk about BioWare anymore. Spoilers, we're going to talk about BioWare here today, so, because I'm not done. So what they're doing is they're saying like, okay, well, we're going to queer the gaming world, and in academia, queer is a catch-all term for something that is other than normative, okay? So for them, a queer game is something like Undertale, where you can fight with mercy, and that's unusual, and outside of the norm, therefore queer. That kind of gets under my skin a little bit. Not the word I was going to use, but we're being recorded, so I'll be polite. Because I'm like, no, like I want more queer people. I want to talk about the characters themselves and the stories and the things that really meant something to me, and I don't want to just gloss aside all of this content. So what I wanted to do is say, I don't think we're done talking about the characters that we have yet, and rather, what I think needs to be done is, how many of you have been to a queer game panel before? And at what point did they say, it's a problem and we need to do better? How many viable solutions were presented for that problem? Yeah. Where you're like, meh? Okay, so there is no like one, concrete path forward. However, there are some things that we can be working on. So here's our kind of like spiral into like, here are the things we can do, and then profit, more queer games. But, do you want to talk about that? Go ahead.
Yeah, so there are obviously, like, as here, as you can see, there's a lot that we can do. I think the biggest thing that we can do is like be hiring more people that are diverse. Like, how many people work in gaming that are just like straight white men and they have no idea.
No offense.
Yeah, well, but I mean, like, they don't understand like the intricacies of being different and growing up different because they're represented everywhere. So we need to bring in people who have stories to tell and like have things that they can describe better than people who are just guessing about it because they've lived it. I think one of the other things that would really like make a huge difference is to stop representing characters, like defining them as being different. Like we want characters that are different, not just different characters. I'm not really like saying that.
No, well, the way we have it written is characters who are queer, who happen to be queer, who have that as a subset of their personality, not here's the queer character. Yep. Right?
And then they have other things that that define them because, the reality is like we're all normal. Like everybody's a little bit different, and like how do you define normal? Also, along with hiring more people who are diverse, like just supporting indie games because, people that have stories to tell that are different aren't necessarily going to be like the people that have all the money. And I don't know what else you have.
Yeah, so I mean, it's neat now because I feel like creating games is a heck of a lot easier now for just independent people who want to do it than it was like, 10, 20 years ago, where it was like the most we could manage was to like mod The Sims and then make them make out. So like I had a whole house full of like the wizards from Lord of the Rings and they were all like making out with each other. And I was like, look, queer stuff. But like now people actually have access to like the tools and things, and they're making games that are telling stories. Like I want to say maybe like Dysphoria was one that came out that was an indie game originally. What's the one about Gone Home, or something like that. These are all great. This is really important work, and you need to be kind of hyping it up and telling people about it, and word of mouth, and supporting these stories that are coming out. For now, we need to work within the industrial framework that exists. So they're game developers, they're churning out these games. Essentially, what the end goal of kind of what I would like to do is to wind up, figure out what is it that queer gamers want more of, and try not to define it as like, here's what we don't want. Like we don't want people to game developers to come up with something.
Remind me later.
Yeah, endlessly remind me later. And we don't want them to be like, what do you think of this? And we'll be like, not that. Try again. What do you think of this? Not that either. There's a lot of them like throwing things out and we're like, yeah, you didn't really hit the mark with that one. Okay, well, how can we express to the people who are making the games, who may not share our stories, how to actually accurately represent our stories? Can we give them a handbook of like how to do queer in a way that we like it? That's the parenthesis. Don't just do it, but do it well. So ultimately, I'm trying to create, this is a fancy word, heuristic, essentially a guidebook to be able to like hand to game developers and be like, here's what not to do, but more importantly, here are the good things that have happened that we would like to see more of. Here's what you can emulate, not here's what you can avoid. Okay? So that being said, to no one's surprise, I wound up using Mass Effect. Dragon Age is actually my favorite, but thanks. Why can't I use Dragon Age? Well, Dragon Age is the story of the world itself. You're following 3 separate protagonists. Mass Effect is the story of the characters. You're following the same relationship across 3 games. So whether I like it or not, Mass Effect presents a better case study material. So Caitlin's like, sweet. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look at Mass Effect. And the reason this happened is because when I was playing it, there were a couple of moments where I was like my queer like spidey senses perked up, and I was like, ooh, that's neat. Yes, more of that. And then there were a couple things where I was like, ooh, not that. So why did that happen to me? Why did that occur? What was it that triggered, that reaction? And so my theory, at least, is that looking at the dialogue and the interactions between the characters in the romance paths, because I'm gonna tell you guys, I only play the games for the romance. I'll like shoot shit or whatever, but like I really just want to love people, or aliens. It's fine. So it like I got through the rest of the shooting to get to the next cutscene because I was so invested in this relationship. Because it was the first time I had ever seen this play out. Because I was just like, yes, I am a nerdy person studying things who would love to have a woman in armor fall out of the sky and rescue me. It's me. So, Mass Effect. So we're gonna look at the transcription. Turns out, you cannot get your hands on a complete, accurate script of of these conversations, or this. So, I hired Rachel to do my work for me. So, if you want to tell them what I made you do.
Okay, what she made me do was that she made me watch a YouTuber play the game, and what the YouTuber played it as the game, and only chose the Paragon option, so all of it would be like pretty flow better, and how would you say it?
So we wanted to keep it consistent.
Yeah, keep it consistent.
Because there are certain dialogue options that pop up if you're a Paragon. There are certain dialogue options that pop up if you're a Renegade. I just picked Paragon because I like it when people are nice. So we just wanted to keep it consistent. So rather than making her like play the game and replay it, I just had her watch playthroughs, since it stays pretty much the same.
Yeah, and so I watched the videos, and the videos were all just basically the one-on-one interactions between FemShep and Liara, and also FemShep and Kaden. And so what I did was I had to pause it every 5 seconds and type down everything they said, how they said it, and what was the actual Paragon option, what it said, what the voice actor actually said, and how the voice actor said it.
Right. Because if you've played a BioWare game, you will know that what the question, like the way the question is worded, is not what you always say. Because sometimes it'll be like, I don't agree. And she'll be like, you're wrong. And I'm like, whoa. So she had to, yes, I made her write down every word that was said, the actual wording itself of the question, and then what was actually said out loud. She had to take notes on like, when it's like certain emotions were coming through and things like that. Poor girl. We've been doing this now for a year and a half.
Yeah, about
so
that.
So we've done the first game, and basically I'm comparing the path between FemShep and Liara and FemShep and Kaden, just to kind of see what's going on in the dialogue. Then I had her do MaleShep and Liara. MaleShep, that's it, I guess, because you couldn't romance Kaden at the. You did do MaleShep and Kaden.
Yes.
Because we were just trying to see like at what point does it diverge. In the first game, because eventually BioWare was like, oh, okay, you can date the Canadian when you get to 3. So now she just finished doing the second game, which, how many of you have actually played Mass Effect? I don't want to like spoil too much of anything. Okay, great. I still will try not to spoil too much, but like not much happens between these two particular characters in the second one. Kaden shows up for a hot second, is like, you're a traitor, bye. And he's gone. And then Liara is there kind of briefly, unless you play her DLC, which is great. And then they get to show up again in the third one. So we're working our way up to the third one. And I'll kind of tell you why it's necessary to go through all 3 of them. But so I'm not going to bore you too much with the specifics of how I analyze this, but it's essentially, there's always a few of you.
I love discourse analysis so much.
Yay! I know, I can always, there's like 2 or 3 linguists in the room who go, like when we talk about this, we're like, yay, qualitative analysis. Okay, but for the rest of you who are not nerds, it's okay, I love you. Basically what this is, it's exactly what it sounds like. Discourse analysis is the PC, like what am I trying to say? The analysis, of conversations and figuring out, what kind of rhetoric is underlying these conversations. How is reality being created through dialogue, through conversations, with other people? And this happens in real life. We have conversations and people analyze them. But what's interesting is when you're doing it in a game, you have to kind of think about, who is this a conversation with? It's you, the player character, and are you having a one-on-one conversation with the programmer after the fact, with the original author of the script, or with this character? And are you the player or are you Shepard? So there's a couple of layers going on between like who is talking to whom and what does that mean? There's actually this thing that I discovered that there was this sort of underground study called the Lavender Lexicon, which is trying to decide, is there such a thing as gay speech? Now, this was being done in like the 70s or 80s, which is why it's called gay speech, and not something a little more like inclusive. And so there's a lot more done on how queer males talk and like the specific intonation and tonality and vocabulary. And they're like, yes, there absolutely is a thing that you can switch into this persona. Less so for women, evidently. Okay, you guys ready? The person who did the study on female queer linguistics, her literal actual name is Birch Moon Woman. Yeah, look her up. She looks like a Birch Moon Woman. So she essentially came up with the like, maybe, not really, I don't know. So, we're kind of looking into how queer is this conversation? How queer, how inclusive is it, rather? Are they performing any sort of identity? And what can we learn about the reality of Mass Effect? Like, essentially, how is equality in this world, in this story, in this space future, being created through the dialogue? Okay? At no point in this transcript, at no point in the game, does anyone ever pipe up and say, like, it's weird that you're dating a woman, FemShep. Ashley, being the racist little thing that she is, will occasionally pipe up and be like, it's weird that you're dating someone with head tentacles. But no one ever comments on gender. Now, something to note is that Liara is the closest thing that we have to a female performing character for FemShep to be with, but she is not cisgendered female. But she is a queer character, right? Because she is technically genderless, because they created this, like, they straight up said, like, we created a sexy blue female-looking alien race because, yeah. Like, that was kind of their reasoning for it. But that presents a couple of really neat opportunities for us because we have this sort of non-binary yet female-coded character that we can use. So I just wanted to throw that disclaimer out there. I acknowledge that Liara is not female. However, she's the closest thing we have. So she's coded as female, she uses female pronouns, and that's how people kind of react to her, and she seems fine with that, so we'll go with that. So here we go. Here's some of this transcript. We changed the font. It's not an Arial anymore, just so you know. Comic Sans. So this is the fruits of poor Rachel's labor. So you can see, what's the yellow one? The yellow is, it's the question. Yeah. It's like when you can investigate and you go to the left and it furthers the conversation, that's in yellow. Blue is the Paragon option. And we'll get to the brackets in a minute. But so this is the part that Megan helped me go through, because clearly I just don't do my own work in this panel. But
yeah, so we studied adjacent pairs, which is basically when somebody presents a question or a prompt and then somebody responds. So that is a pair. But then like if the person who's responding like keeps talking and talking and talking and talking, that's all still part of one pair. So it's the prompt and then the response. So we found that for Kaden and FemShep, they had 70 adjacent pairs. And then, I guess I'm not reading that. For Liara and FemShep, they had 60 adjacent pairs. So this is good because it means that they were more or less pretty equal in terms of the number of adjacent pairs. Like, at least there isn't this huge discrepancy between, like, let's say, the heterosexual love story had, like, 120, and then there was only like 20 for the homosexual. And I guess what could be accounted for in the difference is maybe there was just like one really long cutscene where someone was talking for a really long time. And
it's Liara.
Yes, that's probably true. Or possibly like they just only had FemShep and Liara had one less cutscene, which really just isn't that big of a difference.
So this is it. It's bad in terms of research because we're like, there's no huge, like, there's no aha revelation, which of course you always want to find when you're researching, so you can be like, haha, look at this neat thing I did. But it's good for equality because it means that they had about the same amount of screen time. So when you think about Caden and Shepard having just 10 more pairs, it's likely just because he's there with her in the beginning. So if you go back, they're talking about Jenkins. You guys remember him? No. So he's there briefly. So they get to talk about like, oh, military stuff because he's in the very beginning. And then Liara doesn't show up for however long you choose to leave her in a bubble, I suppose. You go get her first or you get her later. I got her first. So she had 60 adjacent pairs for me. So that doesn't mean much of anything, which is good. It's good in terms of equality. It means they both have kind of an equal amount of romantic content in terms of talking. Liara talks a lot. Liara talks a lot. Oh, yeah. But that has a lot to do with the fact that Liara is the voice of exposition for a lot of what makes Mass Effect, because she has to be like, let me tell you why I'm blue. Let me tell you why I don't have a gender. Let me tell you why everyone hates humans. Let me tell, so she just has to go on and on and on about this. And Shepard's like, interesting.
I should go.
So Shepard, yeah, I should go. She doesn't get to say much in response to Liara for a while because Liara has to lay this out. At no point does Caden have to be like, Shepard, let me tell you about the Canadians. Like, we already kind of know what you are and what's going on with them. So he just has to be like, I've got headaches, it sucks, I love you. Like, that's essentially the path that they take. Liara has to be like, I'm blue, I'm shy, I'm nervous, we have crazy mating rituals. Like, it's just nuts. I don't want to do it yet. I'm scared. I lied. Have sex with me. Boom. Like, so it takes her a while to get there. Now, so let me take, if you look at the brackets, this is something called saliency. We're looking for stressed intonation and saliency. So this is when, now we have our transcript, we had to go back and listen to all of these, and for every single sentence, figure out which words are being stressed. In discourse analysis, this is how you can figure out what information is what we're unconsciously presenting as the most important information. So we went back and took a look at every single stressed word between FemShep and Caden, Caden and FemShep, FemShep and Liara, Liara and FemShep. And we made a word list for every single stressed word, 4 separate word lists, to see what information is being stressed when this person speaks to their loved one more than anything else. I have those word maps. I put them in a fancy little word map so you guys could see. All right, so when FemShep and Caden are talking to each other, the word that Caden says more than anything else is the word right. Now, it is easy to be like, of course he does. Like, so his words are right, sorry, and together. Sorry, which was kind of interesting, and I was like, aw, that's a little bit cute, actually. Yeah, because he's Canadian. Yes, I really wanted it to be like A, but unfortunately, hockey. So he says the word right, and so when I saw this, my instant thought is like, aha, that's a very heteronormative male thing to say there, Caden. Well, that may be true. However, it is important to note that, so for example, if you look here, not there, that's Liara, she's talking again. Here we go. If you look down, I was there, you did everything right. So in that context, it's not him necessarily being like, well, I'm right, and you're not. Or it could be him saying like, I know, right? So that's something to keep in mind. Sorry is interesting, yeah, and then together. When FemShep is talking to Caden, her number 1 words are you and no. Which is also kind of interesting. Shepard honestly doesn't do as much talking as the others.
No, it's just like one word for her for every like 5 words that Caden says.
Yeah, or like 20 something for Liara. Like,
Yeah.
so Shepard doesn't have a lot of opportunity to like share her own story in this one, but she does say you, so she's talking to Caden an awful lot. And then no, like K-N-O-W, but no was my favorite one because I'm just going to leave that one there and let you think about that. Okay, these two together, not an awful lot of like concrete solutions you can draw from this. It's interesting, but it's very context specific. So it's easy to take it out of context and call it a result. Let me show you the next one. More than anything else, Liara says you, no, everything, and partner. It makes a sentence, I realize, but it doesn't, that's just kind of the way the word map happened. I hit refresh a bunch of times until I found blue colors. So it didn't originally make a sentence, but this one's pretty. So, but look at that giant U. So she says that an awful lot, and then the other three I think were pretty much on par. Shepard, more than anything else, says Liara's name, and then you. She never says Caden's name. She calls him Alenko, which is probably just a military thing. Like, that's just them, you know, she wouldn't call her Tassoni, or she might, I don't know, but she doesn't. She calls her Liara. And so she says her name more than anything else. And to me, what this says is that it seems like there's more of an emphasis on the relationship, on togetherness, on partnership. Now, again, with a grain of salt, it could be because Liara spends an awful lot of time talking about partners and mating. She spends a lot of time talking about mating and like how this can happen. Because I feel like they just wanted to let the player know, yes, you can have sex with me. Just so you know, I'm an option. Don't forget. Hey, just so you know. So she comes back and occasionally says stuff like this. But this is pretty interesting to me. And basically, you know, why did I choose Bioware in the first place? Well, because I feel like, yes, we're all kind of tired of analyzing it, but it seems like they're one of the only corporations that's doing things relatively well, that they do include a lot of positive queer characters that, I mean, this story meant so much to me the first time I played it because I was just like, finally. Like, oh my God, finally. This is the story I've wanted to see all this time. And so, you know, maybe they have a couple of missteps here and there, but like, I mean, I thought they did a really great job with Krem from Inquisition, also voiced by Jennifer Hale, who is female Shepard. Just a little bias there, I guess. I know there's some talk about Dorian, about whether or not we thought he was a positive role model or not. I think it was mostly favorable, as far as I can tell. But I think that they're doing more than a lot of other mainstream game companies, which is why I'm looking at what are they doing correct. Let's try to parse out exactly what's being done well. So like I said, we want to be able to emulate the stuff that's going well. So next, like I said, poor Rachel had to do this entire transcript. And so we have yet to look at, like, to do all this same nonsense with male Shepard and Liara and male Shepard and Caden to see if the same words are emphasized. And then we have 2 and 3. Well, the reason we're going to keep pushing forward and not just call it quits at 1 is because you don't really get a chance for them to get into a relationship until 2 and 3 because they spend so much of 1 telling you what's going on in space, which is not as sexy as it could be. So, like, by the time they get to 3, you know, these characters are very intertwined with each other. We don't have to waste time with exposition. We can talk about feelings, and we've been together for like 2 years or whatever at that point. So we're getting there. We're going to see what else happens with this kind of thing. Okay, so here's something you may not know. I think it was a Kotaku article recently, like 2015 or something. They discovered that, yeah, recently.
The other day.
I know. Oh, it's 2019. Ugh, weird. The original animation test for Commander Shepard was a female. So if you Google it and you look for like original Shepard, it's Shepard with boob armor, like running. So all the sort of kerfuffle about like, oh, why is there a female Shepard? Why is she on the back of the cover art for 3? And people didn't even know it was an option. Well, joke's on you. Original Commander Shepard was a female, but they did not animate a separate set of movements for female Commander Shepard. They mapped her onto male Shepard's animations. Now, that's interesting because it's a pro and a con in a lot of ways. But this is how Shepard winds up. I don't know why she wears an evening dress, like why that's even an option. But she's got this like pleather evening gown that she can wear around on the Normandy. But then she sits down and is like, all right then. And she just like spread eagles herself. So yeah, she's female Shepard is coded literally and not figuratively, but like qualitatively and programmatically coded to be more masculine presenting because they mapped her onto male Shepard's movements. Is that a pro? Is it more progressive to allow this female character to, Megan's over here like, yes, please, like more masculine characters. Or is that a step back because they didn't bother to animate a separate set of movements for female Shepard? But if they had animated a set of movements for female Shepard, would she have like primly sat down and crossed her legs or been like, oh, you got, like, what does that even look like? Like, how does she, would that be more reductive if they had coded like, well, she can't act like a man, we got to give her girly moves? Well, what if they had animated her first and they gave them to like male Shepard and he sat cross-legged and was more prim? Like, well, that would be interesting and it would never happen. Right now, maybe in the future, we can keep talking about this kind of stuff. So one of the things that we need to start looking at next is, moving away from the text itself and looking into how gender is performed. So this comes down to, if you're in this room, I imagine you've come up against this problem at some point in your life. It's the question of, if you're in the bar, how do you know who to hit on? How do you glance through a room of people and say, which one of these is an option? Right.
Yes.
With anybody. So just essentially to be like, but it's very difficult for queer people to necessarily identify each other without having a conversation. Is that, so one of the things we were talking about is like, if we were to increase the number of queer characters, canonical queer characters, is it necessary that they have a relationship in order to be queer? My answer is no. But then how do we showcase that? Aside from them having to be like, hello, my name is so-and-so and I am pansexual. Like, do they have to come out and say this sort of thing? Like, how do we showcase this? How do we make it part of who they are? How do we code for this, essentially? How do we make a string of ones and zeros present as queer in a non-reductive way, in a positive way? Because otherwise we're falling back on stereotypes, right? To be like, how do you tell that someone's gay? Well, you shouldn't, you can't, I don't know. Like, this is where I am currently, which is why I have not finished my PhD, because I'm like, ooh, I don't know how to answer this question. But one of the things we can look at in terms of BioWare is the discrepancies between what is written on the page and the way it is performed. So one of the questions I have, and I'm still kind of reaching out to try and find an answer, is the way that certain lines are delivered, was it a choice of the voice actresses or the directors telling them to say something in a certain way? And I'll give you an example. In Mass Effect 2, there's a fella named Jacob who comes out of like nowhere to be your new Kanan. And at some point you can go, he's like Diet Kanan, and he just kind of shows up briefly. And so you get to go talk to Jacob, And I have nothing against Jacob. I wanted to get to know Jacob. So Shepard goes into wherever he is hanging out, typing endlessly, and you initiate a conversation, and Shepard's action is to lean back casually against a table like that. And the line is, he's like, "Commander, is there anything I can do for you?" And Shepard says, "Actually, I just wanted to talk for a while," is what the actual line says. Male Shepard comes in, he leans against the tables like, "I just actually kind of wanted to talk for a while." Female Shepard comes in, she leans back and she goes, "I'm more interested in just talking for a while." Lesba Caitlin was like, "Oh no." I don't want to talk. I want to talk. Like, I didn't okay this. I'm not flirting with you. Like, and then I like balked and I was like, because it's so easy to initiate a relationship with characters you don't want to initiate a relationship with just by being friendly. Because there's some kind of like gregarious algorithm in place that's like, if you're too friendly, now we're in love.
I mean, that's pretty.
And I know, like,
real life.
as someone who likes to talk and meet people, I'm like, oh God, get away. I'm just beating people away left and right. I know, just like real life. But then you wind up and I'm like, I don't want to break anyone's heart. I don't want to have to go through this cutscene where I turn you down. Like, stop being so Canadian. Like, just give me some space. So poor Jacob. So all of a sudden I was like, well, I guess I can't talk to you for the rest of forever because I'm afraid of getting into this. Anyway, so like, it's so crazy if you watch these two cutscenes side by side and you see the difference, and all of a sudden this exact same animation, this leaning back, goes from a very casual, I want to sit on the table, to a very purposeful, I'm gonna sit on this table, like, yeah. Why? Like, so I'm very curious to know, like, you know, was there originally a path in place and they told, but it was only for FemShep because of course it is, and like, what was going on here? It's the same sort of thing as when, you know, what you say, that's like my number one thing with BioWare, is what is on the wheel is not what comes out of my mouth, necessarily. And this is how I wind up like shooting people I don't mean to shoot. Whoops. And romancing people I don't mean to romance. So the last thing that, you know, what I need to do now is to figure out what is it that we want more of? What did you find to be like the most progressive, the most meaningful? Like, what character meant something to you and why? What was it about this story? What was it about some of this content that really just spoke to you? And just to kind of figure out, you know, if I can talk to a whole lot of queer gamers and they can identify, here is what, you know, the same moment that I had with female Shepard and Liara, if they can be like, that happened to me with this one, or I really love this character, or I love how this character presents themselves, but like they don't need someone. I have not played all of the games. I would love to, but I haven't. And so I'd love to hear about, you know, other people's experiences with, you know, maybe less mainstream games. So now I have to send out this survey that this is a thing that the guy who's the chair of he was like, you should do more work than necessary. And I was like, So now I'm doing more work than is necessary. So I have to send out this survey to essentially be like, you know, the results of which determining what do queer people want? What are the characters you like best? You know, what really spoke to you? And how do I map? How much does this match what you want? And I can use the results of that to sort of tailor what's going forward and to help shape this sort of like, literally, I would love to have a guidebook, like an actual list of do's and don'ts to go talk to game developers and be like, let me tell you a little bit about how we're feeling and what we would like and how you can do that, because I know that there are a lot of companies out there who are trying to give it to us. And it may not necessarily be working as well, but I don't know, 2019, Ashley Johnson seems to be carrying the lesbian flag into tomorrow. So between The Last of Us 2, which is coming out soon, hopefully that will be positive. I don't know, fighting zombies and lesbians, we'll see. Yeah, how are we doing on time? Oh, fantastic. So we have exactly 15 minutes for questions, but so that's where we're going. We're going to try to find, I want to talk to queer people. I want to talk to other queer gamers and be like, right now I'm basing this solely on my like autoethnography of how I played this game as a queer person, but I need other people's experiences and things like that. You can follow me on Twitter and answer my survey when it comes out. But that's next, is just to find out how do we move forward in literally identifying what has been done concretely and well, and then taking a look at how do we do more of that. So that's what's going next. So we have, well, that's, PhD. We have like a million sources and everything. But we've got like 15 minutes. If anyone has any questions, be happy to answer them. Yes, in the red.
So, I guess romance-wise, I can't really speak because I'm not going to say I'm not years.
Yeah.
But the thing that I think is like do is try to expound upon what Barbara's been doing, and I think the biggest issue when it comes to how to do queer characters writing is that when you only have one person, or at best two, that represents the full spectrum of people and personalities, it puts way too much like effort into just like, trying to get everything to this one character, and it more often than not ends up failing, where someone's going to be upset about it, even though technically there are definitely people that did and that kind of thing. So I feel that adding in more and see how they would express it through their own personalities is the way to go. And I think in terms of how we communicate this person's queer is quite simply, it's just an issue by default. You always see people. We assume someone is cis, but in a world where I guess you can't assume anyone is any real because of complexion, you're rewarded by getting to know the person, and maybe offhandedly they'll just say something that someone's like, yeah, I really like this girl, or I really like this guy, and you start to look up, oh, okay, like this person is probably into this kind of stuff, and it doesn't ever feel forced or weird as opposed to someone just kind of like saying on something like, hi, I'm a lesbian, I'm gay, and it's just like, okay, I don't know why that's me at this point. Anything else you want to tell me? So I guess like do add more like clear representation so you actually have the ability to explore. Don't add one and then like put all your eggs in one basket or
Absolutely. You're hired. Yeah, that's right here. That's okay. Oh, hell yes.
There is no one way to be queer. You can't just like hand somebody a pamphlet and say, this is the queer agenda. No.
Yes.
This is how you be gay. There's no rule book. I did not get a manual. I did not sign up for this. Happy with it, but yeah. So I'm really worried about the name of the way you presented this panel in the naming of the panel. It's like, congratulations, we did it, we're done.
Oh, no.
And I was like, oh no, what about the gay agenda? You're not done. You cannot be happy with what we have already.
No.
Like for myself, what I really want to see, and why I'm so happy with the fact that they use the same animations for male shepherd as they use for female shepherd, is because I want gay relationships to be portrayed with the same positivity, in the same way that straight relationships are. I want on-screen fucking kisses. I want holding hands. I want actually going out dating and seeing each other. I want sitting on the couch, playing on our phones, not talking to each other for 3 weeks. And it's fine. That's gay.
Yes. Woo, that is, yes.
That's what I want. And I'm tired of what we're getting. I'm tired of other people telling me, oh, but Cora and Sony held hands at the end. Aren't you happy? No, I'm not.
No, yeah, whoop-de-doo. Yes, yes, you are all absolutely correct. So we'll have glasses? Yes. Yes, you.
Awesome. I have a couple of questions. The first one is kind of related. It's how I find your Twitter handle.
Yeah.
Okay. It's Kate, Caite. I guess I could just type it for you. I have a
just put it-
computer.
yeah.
Yes. E and then Dungan, Dungan.
How do I edit a PowerPoint?
I know yield.
Rainbow flag and the little controller next to your name, your Twitter handle.
I do. Fantastic. Here. Dungan. There you go. That's my Twitter.
The actual question slash comment that I had was, I think that the missing queer representation in video games is going to have to sort of come as more of a widespread cultural shift.
Oh, yes.
There's so many different flavors that you can do from games. And one of the things that I did, well, two things that I actually liked. One is that the newest Assassin's Creed finally had a woman character who's a lesbian.
Yes.
And this was after like 5 years ago.
Oh, yeah, when they were like, it's hard. Girls are hard. Yeah. And they were like, they've just got this hair. Do you remember that? They've just got all this hair. Yeah, that's just too hard. Ocean waves and rain and stuff, like piece of cake, but oh, hair, weird. Yeah.
The other thing that I really liked was Stardew Valley. Stardew Valley
Mm-hmm.
is a farming simulator, so if anybody grew up with like Harvest Moon, it's very similar to that. It was animated by one guy in the beginning. There is it? It's a C word used.
Some adjective.
Adjective insert it. And what he did was he just made everything not gated by gender. So all of the cooking options and all of the romances aren't gated by gender. There's 20 possible romance options and like an absurd amount of passion or later. And you can just romance any of them as long as you keep that dialogue.
And wouldn't you think that would be easier to not build in these like diversions? Yeah. There's a David Gator, who is one of the lead writers, or was one of the lead writers for Mass Effect and Dragon Age. There's a forum post where someone asked, literally using these words, can you put in a gay button to turn off the gay options? I don't want to accidentally romance anyone. And he basically came back and he was like, A, no. B, you're not that suave. Like, C, and so he basically was like, it is more work for me to program in a button to save your sensitivities than for you to just not make those choices. Like, so it's confirmed by other, programmers that like, yes, it is more work for us to keep these things separate. So, the other side of that is to be like, well, why did you lock off all the romance options, like to certain things? That took effort, something to consider. So I saw Rainbow, and then, so let me take you, and then in the back after that.
Building off of what was said previously about the importance of conversation as a point of like initiating intimacy between characters.
Mm-hmm.
I'm all about that because I identify as asexual, so there's a lot of lack of representation for those people particularly. We're starting at the beginning of getting the acceptance for other groups and slowly running down the line. So I'd be very interested to see a character that develops an intimate relationship with someone that has nothing
Yes.
to do with sex, and the importance of that, and also the difference between that and essentially a friendship. Like,
Exactly.
it takes it to that next intimate level that would identify that character as asexual.
So that was exactly, asexuality was what I was thinking of when I was thinking of, does there have to be another character to define queerness for one character? Because like otherwise they could be like, well, you could imagine this person is asexual because they're never in a relationship. Well, that's not the same thing, right? So you're absolutely correct. So this is, all of these things I think are moving forward. I think they're moving forward. Ultimately, I think we're making positive progress. I think things are better than they were 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And so you're all absolutely correct in that there just needs to be more and time needs to pass, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you have any suggestions of games that be asexual characters well?
Ooh. Well, off the top of my head, the closest that I can think of is if you romance Josephine in Inquisition, She's the only one that never gets a sex scene, and her like ultimate sort of intimate moment is cuddling on the couch in front of the fireplace. And so they have like, she gets like a Disney princess kiss and her foot pops and whatever. And, but that's it. And they just show like, it's one of the quietest, like gentlest, sweetest of the cutscenes. But that does not necessarily code her as asexual. And, you know, perhaps they could have gone one step further and been like, she's biromantic but asexual or something. But that's about the closest I can think of off the top of my head. Okay, way in the back. And then, by the way, we'll stick around after the panel if you want to ask more questions because we're getting close. Oh, sorry, in the red, and then you can, yeah.
Which would you prefer to see more of going forward in games? Games that just have your characters that exist in the world, or ones that are more fundamental, or have some sort of world where they're actually exploring the concept and how it interacts in society?
I can't say both. I mean, you know, both would be great because, of course, we want to present what our experiences are like for those who can't understand it. But, you know, on that same vein, we want to see more like, you know, less ableism in games and different ethnicities and diversity. And we want to explore what it's like for other people, not just other queer people, but more of that would be great across the board. That being said, I think, you know, but one of the big assumptions that I'm operating from is that pop culture and media is one of the biggest vehicles for social change, and that the more you see something show up, because even if you live in a place like, I don't know, the dead middle of the Midwest where everybody's white, like if your actual physical surroundings are not diverse, you can still get that sort of diversification from the media that you're consuming. So I feel like if we could just more visibility, more characters, more visibility will also lead us to being able to not put all of our eggs in one basket, as you said, because then what if we want to have like a queer villain? Well, that's a big no-no right now because everyone's like, you can't vilify the queer person. Well, if that wasn't such, you know, it's like the queer people have to be saints as well because, you know, there just aren't enough of them around that we can play around with different characterizations. So if we could have an increased number of queer characters and it becomes more normalized, we can then start playing around with the things that are a little bit too touchy right now. So that's what I would err on the side of, but both would be good. Both is good. Yes. Okay, do we have enough time? Okay, one more. And so you started speaking in the gray sweater, so we'll let you go. And then well, sure, yeah. I mean, there are people that we can't, you know, you can't date everybody in real life. You know, and so I think the difference is that it wasn't until Inquisition where they specifically not just locked the programming, but made it part of their identity. Whereas before, you know, if you could date, you know, I'm thinking of, I don't know, who was like Zevran and Leliana and whatever in Origins, who were just options for one or the other, but it wasn't a part of their person. Well, Zevran was like, I'll date anything that moves, but like, you know, for Dorian, it was part of his character and it was explicitly made part of his character, which had not been done before. And so I think that is positive as well. I think you're correct in that identifying these canonical characters and making it part of, you know, locking it for that reason is important and is progressive, as opposed to locking Caden from male shepherd without any indication as to why. That's intolerant to some degree, I feel. It is not purposeful. So I do count Sarah and Dorian as positive, even though their romances are locked. So, okay, one more, and then we'll call it a day, and we'll head out there. And if you want to chat to us, please feel free.
I thought your observation to me where there were no dialogue in college. Nobody ever said like, "Wow, I think it's weird that you're dating a woman. You're a woman." You know, in a lot of games that offer relationships or peers, it's just like college swap where they're like, "Okay, you've got a, you're a male, you have a male partner, great." Like, there's no like, but this male partner got sent away to a camp, he's a teenager, and he's tortured, or this queer person doesn't know how to present to be taken seriously in a job interview, or like the actual things that mirror our society that happens when you start living your truth.
Mm-hmm.
England comes with it, and it's like, hunky dory, yay, let's raise our farm.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is a very silly example, but have you ever played the game Dream Daddy?
That got a bigger reaction than I expected.
Yeah. Okay, clearly you have. Way more people play Dream Daddy than Fear Effect 2. But that's one of those things where it's like all the gay dads in the neighborhood come and have a barbecue. And it's A-okay that everyone's gay. Like, we're more weirded out that you might be a vampire than you are that you're gay. And again, like, there's pros and cons to that, right? Because on the one hand, it's like, wouldn't it be nice if this was the world we lived in? If we could normalize it to the extent that it was not noteworthy. Not being noteworthy would be phenomenal, right? If it was just like, I'm ginger, and that's not noteworthy in any, well, maybe. But, like, it's just a facet of your personality that doesn't really mean much. Like, you're tall, you're whatever. That would be phenomenal. But at the same time, does it diminish the struggles that we have gone through? Would it be helpful to see someone who has gone through the same sort of hardships that a lot of us have? And, wouldn't it be nice to see that mirrored in someone else who came out better for it on the other side? So again, that falls into, we need to tell all the stories. Like, we need to tell all facets of the queer experience, and we need to tell them endlessly. Like, you need to relentlessly tell your story so that there's just more and more and more, and we don't have to decide what is and is not the best thing because there's just so much of it. We have the space to explore narratives and do all these other options. So that's your homework, by the way, is go out and make indie games and tell the stories that need to be told. Okay, so thank you guys very much for coming. Really appreciate it. Oh.